Welcome back to another edition of the Penn State 365 podcast. I'm your host, Richie O'Leary, and joined as always when we're talking Penn State football recruiting, my co-host and Happy Valley Insider.com senior writer, Dylan Callahan-Crawley. Dylan, we have an exciting game this weekend. It's the 2024 Big Ten Championship. First time in 8 years, I believe, that Penn State's been in it. And it's number 1 Oregon versus number 3 Penn State. This is setting up to be one of the better games in all of college football this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is why we do what we do in covering college football is for games like this. Unfortunately, I won't be in Indianapolis. We do have a couple of our writers going to Indy, but I'm looking forward to seeing how this game unfolds while watching from home. And then, the good news for Penn State is no matter the result on Saturday, they're going to be in the college football playoffs. If they win, you're likely the number 1 seed, in my opinion. If you lose, you at worst maybe fall to 6. I think there's a good chance it's Penn State 5, Ohio State 6, or vice versa. So, I mean, Penn State is going to be well positioned here to, I think, make a potential run in the college football playoffs no matter what. We'll see what happens on Saturday, but it should be a good game, like you said. Should be one of the better ones in college football all season. Penn State Ohio State was, a good game. It was a low-scoring affair, but a good game. Ohio State and Oregon was a barn burner, but also one of the better games. So I'm excited to see what type of game this produces.
Yeah, no, it's going to be an interesting one. Now, let's start with the Oregon offense. We know they're very high-powered, very fast-paced. They kind of always have been, I guess, growing up throughout our entire lives.
Yeah,
Dan Lanning's
since
got him.
Chip.
Yeah, well, Chip kind of started it, but Dan Lanning's got him on a different level this season, It seems like. And they're led by Dylan Gabriel and a very potent wide receiver room. How much is Penn State going to have to worry about that passing attack, and can they defend that passing attack? Because Tez Johnson is a dog. A couple other wide receivers they have are dogs.
Yeah.
Like, they're good. Like, they're really good.
No, yeah, I think Penn State is equipped to slow down as a passing attack, but it's going to all be about the pass rush. If you give Dylan Gabriel 3-4 seconds in the pocket to get throws off, it's going to be a long day. The wide receivers are too good. They're going to get their way open. Penn State has been playing more man coverage lately, which does not, I wouldn't say does not, but that will make it tough against wide receivers that are of this caliber. But yeah, I think it's going to be all about that pass rush. I wrote an article last night on it. Abdul Carter is going to get up against Josh Connerly, one of the best offensive tackles in the country, potential top 5 pick in 2026. So I think that's going to probably be a stalemate over there. I think each guy is going to win their fair share of reps, but I'm not expecting Abdul Carter to have 4, 5, 6 pressures in this game necessarily. If he gets 2 or 3 and maybe gets a sack, that's, I think, a good night for him against Connerly. And I think it's going to be up to Nittany, Dennis Sutton, and the guys on the interior to get that pressure on Dylan Gabriel. Penn State's been one of the best teams to get pressure all season. When they get pressure, they usually get there fast, which is obviously would be a big help on Saturday night against the Ducks. But yeah, if they don't get the pressure, it's going to be a long night for the defense because you can only hold on so long against wide receivers of this caliber. But yeah, will they completely stop the passing attack? No, but can they slow it down? I think so. And Dylan Gabriel is a damn good quarterback, but it's not like he isn't prone to making mistakes at times, especially in the red zone. That's somewhere he's made quite a bit of mistakes this year. So I think Penn State will have some success against the Oregon passing attack, but I think Oregon's going to have a couple big plays in this game too. It's just about how many can you limit them to, and of course, when are you limiting them to those? Is it in the moments that really matter, or is it in the ones that hurt, but maybe not as much as others?
Yeah, no, looking back at Dylan Gabriel's stats, 26% of the time he gets pressured, which is like nothing. But when he does get pressured, his percentage drops from 80% when he's kept clean to 48% completion percentage. That's significant. So if you can create that pressure against these tackles, and
Right.
I know I've mentioned it to you a couple times. I know Connerly, obviously amazing offensive lineman. He's been really good these past couple weeks. But mind you, a little bit lesser competition with Maryland, Wisconsin, Washington. But Johnny Cornelius is the one I think they have to attack a little more. He really can't bend all that well. He doesn't have a ton of length at 6'5", 315. And I think that's where a guy like Denai Dennis Sutton, with his edge rushing ability, with his speed, his length, and just the fact that he's a freak athlete, he should be able to at least get around him and create some of that pressure. And going back to like what you said, I feel like that's the answer. It's not going to be Abdul Carter versus Connolly. I think it's more Denai Dennis Sutton versus Johnny Cornelius.
And I'm blanking on their center's name, but him versus Zane Durant is going to be a big one too.
Yeah.
I want to say I think there is a slight misconception as well of what this game, what this Oregon offense is. The one big thing I've heard all this week is Oregon's explosive. Oregon this, Oregon that. Like between these two offenses, if there's going to be a team that has more explosive plays in this game, it's probably Oregon, and that's probably lends itself to because they're wide receivers. Their running back is pretty good too, and just kind of that's what Oregon historically is. Penn State, ground and pound, boring old Penn State. They have no wide receivers, whatever. That's kind of been the thing, right? But I was looking at it. When your plays of 20-plus yards this year, Oregon, 49 plays. Sorry, 58 plays. Penn State, 57 plays. Plays of 30-plus yards, Oregon, 24. Penn State, 22. 40-plus yards, Oregon, 12. Penn State, 12. 57, 5. Now, they have 3 more plays of 60-plus yards, but they only have 4. I mean, this is not that much more of an explosive offense than what Penn State has. Can they score quicker? Sure. If this game comes down to a 2-minute offense, I may lean more towards Oregon, but at the same time, we've seen Penn State execute numerous strong 2-minute offensive drives this season, including one against Ohio State that did result in a interception on a great play right before halftime of that game. But I don't think. I mean, this is a much closer game than people think it is, and this Oregon offense isn't that much different than this Penn State offense, in my opinion, as well. Especially when you look at the explosive numbers. I mean, even go back down to plays of 10-plus yards. Penn State has more plays of 10-plus yards this year than Oregon. So, I mean, I think there's a big misconception of what this Oregon offense is, what this Penn State offense is compared to Oregon. And I think part of that is just kind of historical tendencies over the last few years. Penn State's offense may not be sexy like Oregon's, but both get the job done pretty similarly. And, I think in this case, that lends an advantage to Penn State because I think the Oregon offense is great, obviously, but not as good as people think it is. And I think Penn State's defense is the better defense in this one, especially against the ground game, which I imagine we'll talk about.
Yeah, I think it's more so, too, on top of it. It's just their tempo. Like, it's just a fast-paced tempo for a Big Ten team. We're so used to Penn State's ground and pound, Ohio State's ground and pound. Michigan legitimately just runs the ball 90% of the time. So people are just used to that. And then you see this new offense, these Big 12 offenses, and you're like, oh, holy shit, like, speed does work in the Big Ten. Like, it kind of, tempo does work in the Big Ten. So it is a little bit of an adjustment. But, talking about their running back, too, Jesse James, is pretty damn good. He's averaging 5 yards per carry, but he also has been shut down a couple times. Like, Maryland held him to 20 yards. And if Maryland can do that on a down year for Maryland, you'd have to think Penn State rushing defense should be able to stop him between the linebackers and King and Rojas, between the defensive line, creating pressure, kind of closing those gaps.
Jordan James, by the way.
Jordan James, sorry. I said Jesse James, Jesse James. Oh, duh, tight end.
Great Penn State tight end. Or you could be talking about the Wild West gunslinger.
Well, that too, yeah. But Purdue held him to 50 yards. Like, this isn't like... He's talented, don't get me wrong. He's definitely put up a couple 100-yard games against some talented teams, but he's also had his struggles. So I feel like Penn State could stop that. That's going to help a ton. Yeah,
I mean, this is a good Oregon rushing attack, but it's not a great Oregon rushing attack. They're averaging 5 yards per rush, 176 yards per game. They're running about 53% of the time, but this Penn State run defense is one of the best in the country. 3.1 yards per rush and less than 100 yards on the ground per game. That's going to be, I think really key in this game for Penn State is forcing Oregon to kind of become, no, you're not going to force them to become purely one-dimensional, but if you can force them into obvious passing situations in this game where you are going to allow your defensive ends to, um, you know, have the ability to pass rush in those obvious passing situations, tee off on the tackles per se.
Hmm.
I think Penn State could have success in that scenario. I think the corners could have success in that scenario. But if you allow Jordan James to run wild and free in this game,
Yeah.
I think it's going to make it for an even longer night. You look at what Penn State's done this season against the ground games. Only have allowed 100 plus yards 4 times. Ohio State averaged 4.4 yards per carry against them, 176 total yards. Um, it's that's I imagine it's going to be a little bit higher than their season average 3.9, but if they can keep Oregon to about 4 yards per carry in this game, I think um, they'll be setting themselves up pretty nicely. But that's a big ask against this Oregon rushing attack led by Jordan James. He's a fantastic running back. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think that's a place where Penn State has a potential advantage here. But yeah, they haven't also faced many running backs like Jordan James. They haven't faced many offensive lines like the Oregon offensive line. That being said, I
Hmm.
think Penn State's uh, defensive line held up mostly pretty well against Ohio State. Obviously, as that game went on in the late portions, they struggled a little bit more, but they were on the field quite a bit. So I don't think I'm not worried about the defensive line in this game as much as I'm worried about the offensive line against Oregon's defensive line when we're talking about the trench battle.
Hmm. Flipping it onto the other side, 7 of the 12 games for Penn State, they've scored 30 plus points. Is it as simple as, I know the spread's 50, is it as simple as if you get to 30, you think they could win, or do you think it's going to be a legitimate shootout? And can Penn State maintain a shootout is a real question.
Um, I'd be surprised, honestly. I think if Penn State wins this, they're probably not getting to 30. I think if they win this, it's a low scoring game.
Okay.
If you have to get to 30 to win this game, I'd probably lean Oregon.
Hmm.
Um, Now we've seen Penn State get into kind of a shootout with USC earlier this year, and they were able to win that. Um, but yeah, I think if Penn State's going to win this game, it's going to have to be lower scoring, 27-24. Once you get into the 30s and you get into that shootout range, 60 plus, 60, 70 points, I start leaning towards Oregon just because more playmakers that I trust on the Oregon offense right now than necessarily the Penn State offense. Obviously, Penn State has Tyler Warren. I think he has a chance to have a good game here. Obviously, Nicholas Singleton has been getting going lately, but the wide receivers have kind of been mediocre all year, and this is a good Oregon pass defense, and I just don't know how much you can expect from the Penn State passing attack outside of Tyler Warren in this game. Now, that being said, we've said that for most of the year, and you look up and Drew's almost averaging 250 yards per game, and I think that's a lot to do with Drew's talent alone. But so I think Penn State will have success. But yeah, I think if Penn State's winning this, you got to keep Oregon to about 24 points in this one, which is possible. But again, very few teams have done that this year.
Yeah. How important is this running game going to be for Penn State? Just because I keep looking back at the numbers, and they haven't had a 100-yard rusher since September 28th, and that was Katron Allen against
Yeah.
Illinois. It's been a struggle, basically.
Yeah, they haven't had a singular, you know, 100-yard rusher, but you look at it since the Ohio State game, 6.7 yards per carry, 6.9 yards per carry,
Hmm.
3.5 against a good Minnesota defense, 4.5 against Maryland. They have this season struggled against, three of the better run defenses they faced.
Hmm.
Ohio State 3.8, Minnesota 3.5, UCLA 2.8. So I do have concern if the Russian attack is going to be able to, you know, have sustained success in this game. Um, but that being said, they have been pretty hot since that Ohio State game. We're going to see Tyler Warren in the Wildcat as well, so
Of
that
course. Yeah.
you got to think about that on top of it. But yeah, it'll be highly important. I think Penn State needs to establish a rushing attack in this game. I don't think they need a rush for 200 yards in this game, but I think they need to they need to average around 4 yards per carry. They need to total probably 150 yards in this game on the ground, in my opinion, to probably win it. Because you're going to have to take some of the pressure off Drew. If you can get some explosive plays on the ground, which has been a rarity this year, I think there's a chance to get for the offense to get into a pretty nice groove in this one. But it's going to be a big ask against, and I guess that's my favorite phrase today. But yeah, it's gonna be tough to do that against Oregon. But yeah, it'll be very, very important for Penn State to establish our run, much for the same reason we talked about slowing down the Oregon running game. Penn State is not. Oregon's a team, if they get into, you know, obvious passing situations, has the wide receiver talent to make up for it.
Yeah.
Penn State gets into third and long here. It's not something you want to be if you're Penn State, obviously, in this game, because they do not have the wide receivers to consistently stay ahead of sticks in those situations.
I was going to ask you that one because they're really good in coverage, Oregon. They're actually number 2 per PFF in coverage this season among Power 5 teams.
Yeah.
If Tyler Warren does get kind of swallowed up now, and no team has really been able to do that yet, mind you.
No.
If he does get covered, double team covered, just kind of put in a blanket almost, is there any chance we could see a receiver step up? Because we haven't, I hate to say it, we haven't really seen one solely step up. We've seen Wallace glimpses, we've seen Clifford glimpses, but we haven't seen someone actually grab that by the reins and step up and be like, I'm wide receiver 1, here I am.
Yeah, I mean that's been the issue now for the last 2 years.
I know that's concerning.
I really don't know. Like you said, Trey Wallace has shown glimpses of that, and I think Trey Wallace, if Penn State, if he comes back,
mind you, he's even healthy. I mean, he was practicing.
Yeah, if he plays on Saturday, and if he comes back for next year, I think if Penn State can go out and get a wide receiver 1, he could be a really good wide receiver 2. You look at his stats: 35 for 579, 3 touchdowns. That's all in all pretty good stats. You would take those, but in a wide, it's I think to a point the inconsistency of him not being able to put together those big games back-to-back weeks. I mean, he had 117 yards against West Virginia. Since then, his next best game is 84 yards against Washington. Obviously, didn't play last week. Only had 46 yards against Minnesota, 54 yards against Purdue. Only 3 touchdowns this year, and only one of those touchdowns has come since the season opener, and that was against Purdue. So, I mean, Trey Wallace is probably the best bet to do that. And I think he has the ability to do that. He's shown flashes of that, but I don't see him going off for 5 receptions for 117 yards in this game. I think Penn State's going to need him to have a quality game. If in the case of Tyler Warren getting shut down, I think Nicholas Singleton would have to be a big threat out of the backfield, and I think you'd have to probably get a solid game out of one of Clifford or Fleming. Maybe the X factor here, maybe the guy who you kind of haven't been able to utilize as much as probably would have liked this year that could be a factor in this game is an Amari Evans. He's been a little bit more flashy the last few weeks. Maybe, I don't think they're going to trust a guy like Tyzer Denmark out there a ton in this game. But who knows? Maybe he comes out big. Somebody's going to have to step up and make a couple big plays in the wide receiver unit of this game, with or without Tyler Warren having a big game. Because the Penn State cannot just rely on the rushing attack and Tyler Warren to win this type of game. You're going to need Warren to have 60-plus yards. You're going to need the rushing attack to have 130, 150 yards. And you're going to need at least another wide receiver or two to have, 30 to 50. At least 2 receivers, in my opinion, to have 30, 40 yards. And one of those probably has to be 50-plus, too. So, I mean, it's going to take a total team effort, I think, to beat this Oregon defense and to win this game. Because I don't see this being, a low-scoring game like that Wisconsin game was for Oregon.
Yeah. Don't have to dive too deep into this one, but special teams, does it really make a difference? I feel like Ross James, their punter, and Riley Thompson are pretty similar in numbers overall. It's nothing crazy. They do have a couple kick returners that have proven to be dangerous. I know last week against Washington they had 4 kick returns for 80 yards. That's a 20-yard average, and that's surprising actually, considering most teams just don't return kicks ever.
No, yeah, I think it absolutely is a factor here, and I'm actually trying to pull up the S&P Plus numbers here. If you can give me
Hmm.
1 second,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it in a game like this that I think is going to be low scoring. I think it's going to be, um, somewhere between a 3 and 6 point game. Um, I absolutely think that special teams have a chance to be a big factor in this game. Oregon this season, 22nd ranked special teams according to S&P Plus. Penn State 69th. So I mean, considerable, a pretty sizable difference there. I think Penn State will be able to. Penn State's been able to contain punt and kick returns this year pretty well, so I don't see that being an issue necessarily in this game. Um, and I think Penn State's S&P Plus numbers there are hurt a little bit by the kicking struggles at the beginning of the season. Punting's
Yeah.
been a little bit inconsistent too, but I don't think it's going to be a major concern. But this is an Oregon, special teams unit that you have to be careful with because they can do some things in the return game for sure.
Hmm.
And
All
a
right.
big return can easily, you know,
Yeah.
change the course of this game.
Flip the field, everything.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into this one. Here it is. James Franklin's 1-13 versus AP top five teams.
Yeah.
Can he pull it off? They're right now 3.5 point underdogs, and the over under is 50.5. What are you going with? And kind of tell me why.
Yeah. So you mentioned the stat against top 10 teams.
Oh,
I will also
top 10, top five.
top
I forget.
five, top
Yeah,
five
top
teams.
five. Yeah,
They struggle with both historically.
yeah.
The stat I'll throw out: Penn State is 32-1 the last 2 seasons against teams that are not named Ohio State and Michigan. Yeah, last 2 seasons, teams not named Ohio State and Michigan. Um, I mean that's they don't lose to teams that aren't Ohio State, Michigan. Now this Oregon team is probably pretty close to those Ohio State, Michigan teams, all things considered. Definitely, I mean they definitely are. Um, and Penn State's an underdog in this game, which Penn State the last 2 seasons 0-5 is an underdog. I do think Penn State can win on Saturday. I do. Again, I think it would have to be low scoring. I don't think they would win by more than 3 4 points, but I think they can win the game. The issue that kind of I am is the struggles against top five, top 10 teams. And I said it with the Ohio State game. I thought Penn State could win that game on paper, and they almost did. But until they show me that they can win those games, I have to go with Ohio State in that situation. And that's kind of where I'm at in this game. I think, like I've said, I think Penn State can win this game, but Penn State hasn't shown us yet that they can win these games. This is a big opportunity to do so. You win this game, that is a big of a statement victory as you can have going forward. It sets you up really nicely going into the college football playoffs. Now the narrative would absolutely change. No, it would not absolutely change, but the narrative about this Penn State team this year would change. The narrative against top 10 teams would still be there for the most part because it is only one game. But yeah, I think right now I'm leaning Oregon in a field goal. Um, Probably something like 27-24. I just I I think Penn State is going to have to score quickly at times in this game to win it, and we just haven't seen too much of their consistencies to be able to do so. Um, and this is a really good Oregon defense. This offense, no matter who the OC has been, has struggled against good defenses the last few years as well. So um, I have some concerns about that aspect. I think the defense will be fine, but the defense can only hold on so long against teams like this. Now, perhaps they shut down the Oregon passing attack better than I think they will. They did a really good job against the Ohio State passing attack, all things considered. But at the same time, Dylan Gabriel is a much better quarterback than Will Howard. So I think I think for lack not for lack, but I think I trust Oregon more in this type of situation right now than Penn State. But uh, yeah, um, uh, my gut says almost to pick Penn State, but history right now just tells me to pick Oregon, and that's where I'm at. So I'm going Oregon 27-24.
That's fair. I've looked into just about everything possible with this one, as I should have. But Adam Brenneman, I think, post or said it best on the College Football Power Hour podcast on Yahoo. He basically said Penn State matches up better against Oregon than they do Ohio State, and I think that's a full blown fact. I keep looking at it over and over again. Yes, they have a good left tackle in Connerly. Yes, Johnny Cornelius has been pretty solid. He's been actually pretty good, considering he came from Rhode Island to Oregon. I just think that Penn State's edge rushers are better than their tackles. I think Abdul Carter is going to create some havoc. I think that I'm really high on Denai Dennis Sutton having a crazy game in this one. I think that there's a lot of potential there. And you get some hits on that quarterback, like I said before. When he gets pressured, he's hitting at 48% versus his 80%. Like, that's significant. It's 48.8, 78, 9.2, whatever, you know what I mean. But I think between that, and if you can somehow establish that run game, I know their secondary is very strong, so I don't know how well they're going to do in the pass game, and especially if they're going to put a blanket around Warren, which everyone's tried, but no one's been able to succeed. And I think these running backs, if they can establish some kind of run game, I think Nick Singleton's finally healthy. I think that's going to be the difference maker. That also helps you control the tempo, also helps things open in the pass game. I'm going to be optimistic here and say Penn State. I think it's going to be damn close. Right now I have it 32-28. I think it's going to be a lot of scoring. But I've gotten everyone's predictions on our board right now on PennState.Rivals.com between our site, between every Big Ten writer, between a national recruiting analyst, and every score is essentially 28-24, and it's leaning either way. I just think it might be a little bit more, and that's why I'm saying 32-28.
If I may quickly,
go for it.
The other thing that I am concerned about in this game I mentioned, but we didn't talk about really, is the Oregon pass rushers against Penn State's offensive line. Oregon this season, 4 pass rushers with 25 plus pressures. All 4 of those guys have 4 plus sacks as well, including Jordan Birch, one of the better edge defenders in the country, 9 sacks this year, 29 pressures. Mateo Ugalele, DJ's brother. Always butcher that name, even though I helped cover Oregon State recruiting before. Always butcher that. He has 31 pressures this season, 9 sacks. Derek Harmon's one of the best defense tackles in the country. And then Tidem Tui Odi, our defensive end. He has 31 pressures and 5 sacks. There's just so many good edge rushers and interior defensive linemen on this Oregon team. I'm not too worried about Drew Sheldon. Drew Sheldon's kind of like one of those guys who never grades out well when you look at it like from a PFF sense, and it never looks great necessarily, even on tape. But he hasn't allowed a sack the last 2 seasons, I think. But on the other side, Dylan and Richie has been a little rough at times this year, and that's a matchup that I am worried about for Penn State. Because if you have to, that means you are going to either have to use a second tight end to help block on that side if he struggles, or you have to use one of the running backs, which takes out a key part of the pass attack at times as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm just worried about how that matches up for Penn State a little bit in this one too, which is another reason that I'm leaning towards Oregon in this game.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. The offensive line, I haven't really had any concerns with. Donkow being out obviously hurts, so Rucci being in is a little bit of a question mark. So we'll see what Oregon could do.
And Harmon versus of course I'm blanking right now. Nick Dawkins is going to be a key matchup too. Dawkins has had a solid season, but has struggled a little bit with some of the better, explosive DTs he's played this season.
Yeah, so that's it. That's all we got for you guys today. Going to be an interesting one tomorrow night, CBS. Tune in, obviously. I'm sure everyone's going to that listens to this. And if you haven't already, check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, PennState.Rivals.com. Bunch of insider information between transfer portal. A couple names are already starting to show Penn State's already starting to show some interest in a couple different names. A lot of wide receivers. We know they're pushing pretty heavily, but stay tuned because we'll have a transfer portal podcast breaking down all that soon. We'll also have a little bit of basketball talk later today, tomorrow, and that's pretty much it. That's all I can think of. And stay tuned for some recruiting news this weekend too.
Yeah,
Wink,
could be
wink,
a
wink.
nice pickup there coming soon.
Yeah. So for me and Dylan, that's another episode of the Penn State 365 podcast. Signing off.